Hello and welcome to another episode of Driven by Doing. Today we have Shobhana Viswanathan from San Francisco, United States. Shobhana, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Venki. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure just hearing your story. And you are the global head of product marketing and innovation at Automation Anywhere. So let's begin your journey back in India. So that's where you're from, Bangalore, India. So let's begin from there. So you did your electrical engineering while you were in India, and then your MBA. So walk us through how it is back then to kind of like be an electrical engineer and then your whole transition moving to United States.
Sure. So, Venki, as you mentioned, I started out being an electrical engineer. And back then, maybe things have changed. If you were born into a family like mine, there were two paths. You either become a doctor or an engineer. And, obviously, I was scared of blood. I couldn't dissect a frog. So I decided, okay, let me do engineering. And I was a good student and I loved electrical engineering. Um, and at the end of it, I actually took a coding job with Tata Consulting Engineers. So I actually worked as a software engineer for a year. And at that time is when I realized that I'm a people person and I really want to work in business, solving business problems with technology. So that's when I went and got my MBA from the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. And I think I found my space, at least maybe not my passion right away, but I did realize that was a better fit for me. And after that, I started my career actually in IBM in India, and then moved to the Bay Area. And when I started in IBM, we were just at the beginning of the whole revolution in India with IT. And so it was a good time to be in IT and a good time to be in marketing, although marketing hadn't evolved to a point where it has now. It has so many different branches, right? Then it was more about, just creating a buzz for the product. It wasn't as evolved as now. And then I came here and I've worked in industry leading companies like Sun and VMware, as well as in startups. And my home now is in the Bay Area, like you mentioned.
Absolutely. And one of my first question is like, how did you find your first opportunity out of your college?
So I think right out of college, the first opportunity would be basically based on career fairs at school or through people that you knew. So for me, I think I was recruited, but other people found their jobs through people that they knew. That those were the common ways people found a job in those days, because it wasn't the internet hadn't happened yet. It was just the beginning. So I would say those were the primary methods. Whether it was the right job, whether you found your right niche, I think is it was more of a exploration rather than the final destination, like most jobs are even today.
Gotcha. Now that you moved to the SF after those couple of stints, like right out of college, like what was your experience right after coming to the San Francisco, and now you're working at Sun? Like, how did that whole experience influence you at that very early stage in your career?
I think coming to Sun was a beautiful experience because I really liked the company. Even today the best company that I worked in, for a couple of reasons. One, the technology was stellar, and there was openness to the company. I think there was a lot of transparency, openness. People were empowered. So to me, those were very refreshing and like a breath of fresh air. And Also for me, given that I have a very technical background but love business and marketing, I think it was a good match to understand technical concepts and distill them and educate people on the benefits rather than just give them a deep dive into the features and just talk in speeds and feeds. To actually weave a story and a narrative around it was, I think, interesting and exciting. And I worked in the Solaris group in software, actually working on a product called Sun Cluster, which is really a business continuity and disaster recovery product. So that was one of my first stints, and I cut my teeth in product marketing at Sun. So I'm grateful to Sun.
And then you eventually moved on to the VMware. How was that experience after working at Sun?
VMware in 2007 was the Wild West. So this was pre-IPO, and I joined for the technology. To be perfectly honest with you, I was just fascinated with how someone could take virtualization, which had been around for many years with IBM, and get it onto an x86 platform. And not only do that, but articulate the business value beautifully to an IT audience. In fact, it was a bit paradoxical to me that someone who had all these servers would actually retire their servers for consolidation and consolidation benefits. So it was really fascinating to me that this company had figured out both the technical aspects of x86 virtualization, but also providing value. And our early customers then were VI admins and IT, and later we started selling to the corner office. So for me, it was understanding pain points, addressing those pain points, and then selling to the corner office once we kind of built a good following with our core audience, which was VI admins.
And now that after having those experiences, Shobhana, you kind of like have many years of product market experience. And as you rightly mentioned at the beginning of the show, that the marketing is completely different way back then, now what it looks like today. What are the main shifts that you saw during those last 15, 20 years that has really taken off, especially in the product marketing space?
Sure. So let's take marketing as a discipline, right? I mean, we all have read Philip Kotler. We all understand the 4 P's of marketing: product, place, pricing, and promotion. That hasn't really changed. But what has changed is that marketing was more about advertising. It was more about the big idea. It was more about the agencies kind of driving your marketing with billboards and campaigns and TV ads. Now what's happened is marketing has 2 aspects to it. There's an art to marketing, but there's also a science to marketing. So if you look at the art, it's the storytelling, it's the messaging and the positioning, but there's also science aspect to it, which is very data driven. And you work in data science, and I think for me, the emergence of digital marketing has been huge. I mean, with the proliferation of the internet, with COVID more recently, I think digital has taken off. And even within marketing, you have core product marketing, which is really how do you take a product to market. You have digital marketing, which is how do you scale through digital channels. And it has so many different facets. You could have social influencer marketing, you could have account-based marketing, and then you have other types of marketing too, depending on whether you're a SaaS company or a traditional B2B company. So to me, I think marketing now has a seat at the table. From a support function, it has become a core function, and people can specialize in different parts of marketing and depending on their skill set. And I think there's a lot to learn. So it's become more of a function where you can never stop. Something is happening every day. Gone are the days where you would launch your product at VMworld or at Dreamforce. Now it's all, you could have a launch on LinkedIn. You could have a digital launch, and people are on the internet. So it's amazing how far marketing has come, and I'm really excited for marketing.
And especially, I think a couple of insights there that you mentioned about how the whole marketing has changed its position from being a supportive role to the front end forefront of any business. I mean, we are seeing a lot of great technologies that are coming out every single year, especially in the marketing has been shifting. And the recent one, we have seen how the Clubhouse has changing
Yes.
This new social audio that is actually taking place, and only time will tell how this is going to shift the overall ecosystem down the line. And there is one more trend that we are also seeing, especially from the data and privacy. And in the last 3 or 4 years, we have seen the whole global trends around these data and privacy is shifting like very rapidly. Do you think like any of these things would impact especially the marketing side of things, because we are talking about data and we are talking about privacy, and like we are also talking about like a lot of big players like Apple changing their regulations across these third
Yes.
party cookies, and like how I mean, people are already talking about how this is going to actually impact digital marketing. So what's your thoughts about these things?
So I think the FANG companies have come under fire for for a variety of reasons. One of them is, hey, their market cap is over some of the national economies GDP, national their overall country's economy. So I mean, given that these platforms are so powerful, can we really rely on them to be custodians of the people? So I think there are two or three things at play here. One is privacy, as you mentioned, with all the things that have happened with Facebook and even with Google having a lot of your data. So I think there's two aspects. One is privacy, and then there's ethics too, right? So I do think we'll have to re-examine policy around who owns data, how they can use the data, and be a little more. Now, I think the cat's out of the bag in many cases. I think people have given away their data. They didn't realize they were the product, right? And so they've given away their data. But I think to your point, we can arrest a few of the things that are happening. For example, AI is going to be very prevalent, right? Yes, the internet has already happened, and Facebook and Google, all those have happened. But if you look at AI, I mean, AI is coming of age right now. And so maybe there's an opportunity to enforce ethics in the design of products, right? You eliminate biases even when you're designing your product. For example, if it's all being designed by men, then it's not very friendly to a woman. Or it could also, you've got to understand what algorithms are actually uh, are they for good or for not, or are they for good, or are they the good for the good of the company or good of the people? So I think AI is an area where I think it's still in the early days. We can take action. Privacy, I think we can slam the brakes on what has happened so far, but I think there's been some damage done already. Um, and I think marketing needs to take ownership, as you mentioned, about some of these things that have gone wrong. And I know that marketing's job is to sell and embellish, but I think you've got to put the customer first, and it's something that I think rests on our shoulders.
Absolutely. I think you have rightly mentioned like around like the policies. I think that's what we are seeing like every day in the news, that how things have been changing like, really quickly, and how these policies that like will help us going forward. And you
Yeah.
also brought up a very good point around the AI, and we are just the beginning stages, and this has to do with like a lot of the decades to come are going forward, and like how we build these products, and especially any product, especially with the internet. We are building products for global economies. And you also mentioned about just having like male people creating these products or women creating. It's almost like we need to bring in like diverse people from all around the world together in order to be able to like really build products for the world. So I think that has been the forefront going forward. And now that like we talked about that, do you think that especially with after pandemic and the whole virtual world that we are seeing in the last 1 year, has anything, especially from a shift standpoint, like you have worked for several years in San Francisco in Bay Area, where it is the mecca for technology and innovation, especially in this new era of virtual world. Do you think that it is more leveling field going forward?
I think there's two schools of thought on this, Venki. One is exactly what you mentioned. Remote is the new perk, right? So with everyone working remotely, um, even people in the Bay Area are not going to work. So that is the new normal. Even if we have a hybrid model, I think we will still be remote most of the time. Um, there, I think what happens then is, okay, so you can find an equally skilled engineer in any part of the world who can do the same job, or a product manager, or an HR person. So, so does innovation then die in Silicon Valley? That's one question. The other question is, okay, so Silicon Valley already has this sort of ecosystem, whether it's Stanford, Berkeley, and all Sand Hill Road, and all the companies that are already here. They are continuing to innovate. They're not going to go away. So I think the answer is somewhere in between, Venki. So I would say, based on all the doomsayers, and including people that are moving to Austin recently, including Ellison and Musk, there's some of that going on. But I think innovation is alive and well here. But there will be some, I think, changes, much like what happened with Amazon and Microsoft creating an ecosystem in Seattle. You will have different pockets being created in different parts of the country. Austin is an example. I would say, Boston would be another one. Denver is another one. I see that there will be several hubs for technology innovation, and maybe Memphis too. I don't know. But
definitely, why not?
And but the other thing that's happening is people are moving to remote locations. Now,
the new nomads, right? Yeah.
the new digital nomads. So I am a firm believer that collaboration is instrumental for innovation. So, I mean, whether you're remote or in the same place, I feel like you still have to collaborate. And I think it's high time we level the playing field, but I think Silicon Valley will still have a substantial part to play.
Absolutely agree with that. And now, again, coming to the whole startup ecosystem in Silicon Valley, and like we see a lot of startups growing up every year, and like you advise a lot of startups and early stage startups. Like, what do you think are some of the common challenges that you see across on board? Because like a lot of first time entrepreneurs who wanted to break into tech and innovation, we definitely wanted to see them grow. At the same time, there are common challenges that you as a mentor would be seeing. Hey, like this is the common challenges that I see across the board. So are there any of those things that you wanted to share with us today?
Sure. So I think definitely from my own experience, I find that many of the founders are technical founders. So they go with a great idea that they get wedded to even before validation. So I think product market fit is a big thing, right? So I do think that people are building products for two reasons. One is they think it's great and it's a technical challenge they're solving. Or number two, there's a lot of money going into this in this space. So they just want to build a Me Too product that they can hack together quickly so that they can get funding. So I mean, I think you really have to be thorough in your due diligence from a product market fit and from understanding your audience. I mean, who are your customers? Test out your products before you actually go full hog. Do an MVP, get a minimum viable product, test it, see what the interest level is, and then bootstrap it for a while before you ask for funding. Because I honestly think people should keep as much equity as they should before they dilute it. So just don't come up with an idea, go ask for funding, and then you're not able to deliver because you've never validated product market fit. You didn't have a single customer. And the product was either too ahead of its time or it solves a very narrow set of problems. So I think those are my big pieces of advice. But of course, you have to kind of look at broad trends when you're defining a product. For example, I think that there have been COVID heroes, right? Who would have thought Zoom would be a superstar? Or even Shopify, for that matter, is now enabling so many companies to break into the digital world. So I do think there are black swan events, but then I think overall trends you should be aware of, and take advantage of COVID too. I mean, I think there are companies taking advantage of this situation, even things like hiring or recruiting. I think have huge opportunity now.
Absolutely. I think you rightly mentioned, especially with the startups, one of the key strategic things working on startups is the timing. Timing is most valuable than any other piece inside startup. Like that is something that I learned from my own experience in the past 2 years. The timing and of course the product market fit. Without getting product market fit, it is super difficult. I mean, we have seen products getting a lot of funding even before they get the product market fit, really fail at those early stages. And these are some of the common lessons that we see on the board. And thanks for sharing those great insights about those challenges for startups. And my next question is, once you find that product market fit, again,
Right.
there are so many other challenges that as startup entrepreneurs we come across. And one of the things is, how should we scale? Whether you are a B2C and B2B, there are so many challenges, set of challenges in itself, right? Once you find the product market fit, especially with a lot of technology around, what are the best ways that you would advise any startup founder or entrepreneur who might be technical? Because a lot of technical founders, they kind of focus on the technology, and they kind of find this product market fit. Now what? I don't know how to scale this, or how to reach out to more customers. So how can people? What's your advice on this topic?
So I think for me, the best advice is from one of my favorite books of all time, Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. Jeffrey Moore has also been a guest on my podcast. He talks about how you have different stages of crossing the chasm. You start with the early majority, then you have you start with the innovators, and then the early majority, the mass majority, and then the laggards. So you want to kind of address the early adopters first, and figure out who that audience is. So they're the audience who tries the Apple Watch just as soon as it's launched, right? They are the people who will go get a Peloton even before it's announced. So that's the market you want to attract, to kind of try out your MVP and make sure that you got it right. And the strategy and the tactics for that market are very different from when you hit the early majority. And then between the early majority and the late majority, there's a chasm. That's when you really need to scale, and that's when most companies go under. And I'd be happy to provide some resources to actually explain that further. But I think you have to look at it as distinct audiences with distinct needs and wants, and addressing them at those different stages of the journey. And if you can't scale between the early majority and the chasm, then you're sunk.
Now, coming back again, my next question is, now you're currently working at Automation Anywhere in the remote process automation, which is a huge trend that we have been seeing in the last few years. And how are these global companies leveraging remote process automation? And
robotic process
automation. And if you could actually let our audience know, what is robotic process automation and how are these big brands leveraging it?
A great question, Venki. So robotic process automation is basically software that automates any business process. So think about a business process like invoice processing, employee onboarding, accounts payable, accounts receivable. If you take any of these processes, you'll find that they have a lot of manual work involved. You will find they're repetitive. You will also find they're error prone. Now with software, we're able to actually solve these three problems, right? You can actually remove errors. You can do them quickly. You can You can remove the sort of the boring nature of the job by just automating them and helping people probably upskill and do something different. Because who wants to take something from an invoice and copying it to Excel and then copy it somewhere else? So unfortunately, a lot of the industries like healthcare, pharma, even finance, they've been very paper intensive. So we look at paper intensive, process heavy industries that can actually solve their problem with RPA. And the reason that it's becoming even more important is because of digital transformation. And as companies become digital, some of them have APIs, but a lot of them still work with legacy systems. For some of those legacy systems, they really need to start automating to show ROI. And I think we've actually helped so many companies, including companies like Bank Colombia, Dell, Sprint, lots of telcos. Just to give you an idea, 7 out of 10 banks, 6 out of 10 tech companies, 7 out of 10 telecom companies use our product. And it's just the beginning, right? I think RPA is just the beginning of automation. And even if you look at something like document processing, then you could use AI for intelligent extraction. You could use voice. So these are some trends we're starting to see. And certainly COVID has accelerated the pace.
I think you mentioned the whole the digital economy taking place and the digital transformation, which is like very important for every industry that is out there. And remote process automation, and as you rightly mentioned, the AI are going to definitely help a lot of these big brands in order to, because like a lot of paper intensive industries that have been there for years are looking for ways in order to automate this process so that people would be more efficiently using their skills that they wanted to leverage in order to build their systems and things like that. And now my next question is, now that we talked about a lot about like remote robotic process automation and now AI, what are the few trends that you have been noticing that are going to be super critical in the next decade?
So at a high level, I think AI and cloud will become symbiotic. Cloud will enable AI, AI will enable cloud. A voice will become very important. Language will become important. Technologies like natural language processing, NLP, or automatic speech recognition, ASR, will become important. Because if you look at customer service, if you look at customer experience in the contact center, for example, today the experience is quite bad. And we all need to acknowledge that there's a lot of room for improvement. And so voice can play a big role. You have Alexa, you have Siri for consumers. I think we need to kind of make sure that that's available for B2B. So I do see voice becoming huge with AI. I mentioned already that AI ethics is important. So to me, I think that's a policy matter, but it needs to be addressed. We're seeing the beginning of AI ops in companies like mine for document processing, for extraction, for a little bit of chatbots, which also is used in marketing, by the way. I'm also seeing that IT is the persona that's now pushing AI to scale. So for them, their lives become easier. And they're actually making sure that AI gets adopted. Now, it's not the AI of science fiction. It's very mundane AI. It's more automation at this point with a little bit of ML, but I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And if you look at Gartner estimates, the market is pretty large. And I think McKinsey did a study where they said at least half of the companies by this year will adopt some kind of AI in the Fortune 500 group.
Absolutely. I think those are definitely, we are going to see a lot of adoption down the line. And thanks for sharing great insights and trends that you have been noticing and that are going to be like, revolutionizing the next decade or so. And thank you so much for your time today, Shobhana. And where can people find you if they wanted to reach out to you?
So Venki, it's been an absolute pleasure. People can find me on LinkedIn, SHOBHANAV, Shobhana V, I also have a podcast, which is the Change Alchemist, where I talk to change makers and help people navigate the world. So you could find me at thechangealchemist.com. I'm on iTunes, and please feel free to subscribe and leave me a review. You can find me on Twitter, again, at Shobhana Shobhanav. You can find me at Clubhouse as well with the same handle, and on Facebook, of course. So I'm as social as anybody else.
It's a pleasure talking to you, Shobhana, and thanks for not just sparing some time for us today to be able to really share all these great insights and your story, how you got to where you are today. And listeners, please definitely check out Shobhana's profile and kind of reach out to her. And most importantly, just go out and listen to the Change Alchemist podcast. She brings a lot of great guests from around the world who are thought leaders in their space. And I get a lot of great value just by listening and learning from those episodes. So definitely check out the Change Alchemist and please leave a review there as well. Thanks a lot for listening today.
Thank you, Venki.
Thank you so much.